Okay, good morning. So we are doing Parshas Va'era, Chelek Tes Zayin, Sicha Gimel. It is a Rashi Sicha, but what's exciting about a lot of these Parshios is there's stories that we all know pretty well about Moshe and Aaron meeting up with Paro. So it makes it a little easier to just relate to the storyline and picture everything going on. Lachar tainas Moshe Rabbeinu el Hakadosh Baruch Hu hen ani arel svatayim eifishma elai Paro Namar vayomer Hashem el Moshe re'en naticha Elokim laparo va'aron achicha ya nivecha atat tedber es kol asher etzavech va'aron achicha yedaber el Paro. So I just basically read from the Chumash. It says in the Parsha that after Moshe complains to Hashem and says, "I am arel svatayim," I'm going to use.
Excuse me, where is it in the Chumash?
I was just about to do that. It is pasuk Perek Vav pasuk Lamed in
right.
Most. Well, we'll look at the pasuk in 1 second. Sorry about that.
Okay.
No problem. So Moshe says, so why don't we just do that now? Take the Chumash. If you have a Chayenu, makes it really easy. Perek Vav, pasuk Lamed. Moshe says, before the eternal, I have it's translated speech impediment, but Rashi says, arel svatayim means my speech is stopped up, an obstruction of some sort. So how will Paro listen to me? Then Hashem says to Moshe, look, I have made you a master over Paro, and Aaron, your brother, will be your spokesman. You shall say everything that I command you to say, and Aaron, your brother, shall repeat it to Paro, so that he shall release the children of Israel from the land. So Hashem says to Moshe, I will give Paro over to you. You will be like a master over Paro, and Aaron will be your spokesman. You will speak, and what you speak, Aaron will deliver to Paro. So Rashi, mitzatet atamilim ha-pochatot atat tadaber. So Rashi has a commentary on pasuk bet. Now we're in Perek Zayin. On the words atad tadaber, you shall say. And Rashi says, Pam achat kol shlichut v'shlichut kepi sheshama mepi va'aron achicha yamlitzu v'yatinu ba'aznei Paro. And if we look at the English, each separate message once, just as you would have heard it from my mouth, and then Aaron, your brother, shall express it eloquently and explain it so that Paro will understand. Kolomer Rashi, Sover shebe'ata tedaber va'aron achicha yedaber el Paro, ein hakavana shemoshe yedaber rak el Aaron v'sha'aron bilvad yedaber el Paro. So as Rashi is saying, you will speak, and then Aaron will speak to Paro. So it does not mean that Moshe will speak to Aaron and Aaron alone will speak to Paro. It's clear that Moshe himself is going to be speaking to Paro despite his speech obstruction. So now we're going to backtrack to Parshas Shmos last week. That right after Moshe complains to Hashem, and this is last week's Parsha, Perek Daled Pasuk Yud. So if we go over there, it says, Moshe said to the Eternal, please, O Lord, I am not a man of words. Not yesterday, not the day before, not even when you began speaking for your servant, for I stammer and have difficulty speaking. As you see, the last words of that pasuk are kaved peh v'kaved lashon anochi. I stammer and have difficulty speaking. So we've had this conversation before between Moshe and Hashem. Shalach na b'yad tishalech. Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'dabart elav el Aaron v'daberhu el ha'am. And over there, Hashem says, and you will speak to Aaron, and Aaron will speak to the nation. So that seems a little bit different. Over here, we're being told straightforward that Moshe has to speak. Over there, it sounds like Moshe can speak to Aaron, and Aaron will then speak to the people. Ela shagam Moshe yedaber el Paro.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but the sicha that you sent this week, you send Gimel or Dalid. Like I think I got Dalid. I was looking
Are
at
you
the
looking at the
Chumash and
actual
now I
Sikha?
looked at it. What?
Are you looking at the actual Sikha or did I write that it was Sikha Dalet? Because I might have actually written with Sikha Dalet.
No,
but
I'm looking at. I printed out the Sikha and now I'm looking at it and it's not. This is about the Svardeya.
Oh, okay.
And then Sikha Dalid. So I need Sikha Gimel.
Okay, so that was my mistake. I'm sorry about that. If we want to, I could stop the recording for 1 second. And I'll grab the Sikha off the website. Unless somebody else wants to do it. Okay, so I am gonna continue from here. And feel free to unmute if you have a question. So everyone should have the Sikha at this point. And I am at the middle of Chelek Aleph. So we started by comparing what's happening in this week's Parsha to last week's Parsha, where in last week's Parsha, Moshe says that it's kaved peh v'kaved lashon anochi, I have trouble speaking, and Hashem tells him that he will be sending Aaron with him. But it seems as if, at least at first glance, that Moshe will speak to Aaron and Aaron will speak to Paro. So this is the 4th paragraph. Ela shagam Moshe daber el Paro, aval Moshe yedber rak pam echad v'Aaron yamlitz v'yatzim. So it's in our situation, it says that Moshe will speak to Paro one time, and Aaron will then translate and explain Zot ba'aznei Paro into the ears of Paro, ad asher yishpa v'shalach es b'nei Yisrael ma'artzo, until they'll have such an impact on him that they will be able to send b'nei Yisrael from Egypt. They'll be able to send the Jewish people, like Paro himself will send the Jewish people out of Mitzrayim. And then it says in brackets, this took me a minute or two to decipher, Lefichach musaf Rashi es hamila vayit anu ba'aznei Paro. This is why Rashi adds the word ear. Why does he have to say, I'll talk into your ear? We know that if you're talking, it goes into a person's ear. Lemarot b'Torah katuv el Paro b'ofen stami, despite the fact that in the pasuk it says, the pasuk itself, it says to Paro in a very straightforward stam, as we say, straightforward way. But Rashi uses the word speak into his ear in order to connect us to something that happened at the beginning of Parshas Vayigash, which if you recall, that's where Yehuda finally meets up with Yosef, and they have this very significant meeting where Yehuda is going to impress upon Yosef that it's completely unfair what you've done to my brother Binyamin. You're holding him a slave. It's unfair to him. It's unfair to my father. And he speaks to him in a very strong way, and his words penetrate to Yosef. So we're making a parallel here that when Moshe and Aaron are going to talk to Paro, it's with that strength and with that toughness, and in a way that the words are really going to penetrate, just the way Yehuda was prepared to speak to Yosef. As we know, that didn't become an argument. Yosef reveals himself at that point. But that's why Rashi brings the word ba'aznei, to make that parallel. Daver ba'aznei Adoni yekansu divrei ba'aznecha. That the words should penetrate into your heart. They should really go into you. Hata'amim mechayvim leparesh be'ata tedaber hakavanash hi shemoshe yedaber el Paro v'lo el Aaron. And the reason that Rashi has to explain on the phrase ata tedaber, that's the words that he pulls out, is because it means that Moshe will speak to Paro directly and not to Aaron, via Aaron. Bishoneh mehamuspar parsha Shmos, which is different than what we learned about last week in last week's parsha. The perusham shel mispar pashtanim gam kan, and as well from the interpretations of others there, which are hem aleph harei kvar ne'amar b'pasuk hakodem sheva Aaron achicha yehia neviecha l'shama chozeret haTorah v'omeret ata tedaber v'Aaron achicha yedaber. It already said in the previous pasuk that Aaron will be your spokesman. Aaron will go with you. So why does the Torah have to go back and say ata tedaber? Aaron achicha yedaber. You are speaking, and Aaron is speaking. And another question, a shot question. Lifnei ken nemar b'Torah hem hamidabrim el Paro kilomar gam Moshe dibar el Paro. It already said in the Torah that the two of them will will speak to Paro. So it seems obvious that Moshe is going to be speaking to Paro. So because of those two points, those two questions, Rashi is forced, Mikan Hechach Leperush Rashi, Shagam Moshe Yidaber El Paro. So yes, Moshe will be speaking to Paro. Aval, what's unique about it? Rak Pam Echat, just once. The Aaron Achicha Yamlitzu V'Yatinu. And Aaron will do the rest. He will translate and he will explain it profoundly or in a way that the words penetrate. So in a certain sense, we have our question and our answer. But obviously that's not enough. We're asking like, what is going on here? What's different between now and last time? And Moshe will be speaking directly to Paro, but he's only going to be speaking once. The rest Aaron's going to do. Okay, so Seif Bet, but we have more questions. Parsha Shmos Misupar Sheleachar She'aspu Moshe v'Aaron Asiknei Yisrael. In Parsha Shmos, it's speaking after, it says, after Moshe and Aaron gather the elders of Israel, Ba'u Moshe v'Aaron vayomru el Paro vayomru elokei ha'ivrim. Moshe and Aaron come and they address the people and to Paro, and they speak to the people, Bilashon Rabim, and this is said in plural, meaning it's both of them doing it together, which would imply that Moshe has already spoken to Paro. So that kind of changes up everything that we've said so far. Because if Moshe has already addressed Paro, so then what's going on here that we have all this question about Moshe speaking directly or not speaking directly, because it seems like he already did it. Kilomar gam az dibru shnehem el Paro, which is to imply that the two of them, both of them spoke to Paro. The miyuchad kasher haTorah mishana min hanemar kodem legabe kol ziknei Yisrael. Nemar v'yadavru Aaron asher dibar Hashem el Moshe legabe Paro namru vayomru. So actually, when it talks about speaking to the elders, it says Aaron spoke to them the words of Moshe. However, with regard to Paro, it says vayomru. They both spoke, the two of them. V'pashtis savir shagam sham b'hius Moshe kaved peh v'kaved lashon. And as we already said it last time in Parshas Shmos, Moshe said kaved peh v'kaved lashon. I have difficulty speaking. Sharei mishum kach kavah hakadosh baruch hu she'Aaron yeh lecha peh. And therefore Hashem already gave him the solution. Aaron will be your mouth. Aaron will be your spokesman. Hulo harbe lidaber beharchava beperut bepamim ravot ella amar esaikar b'samach el Aaron. So Moshe doesn't have to explain thoroughly, and he doesn't have to go into all the details. And he just has to say the main point, and he can rely on Aaron. Asher yatim esbarav kehorav the parshatenu, and he will explain his words, just like Rashi is saying in our parsha. The im ken misoreres ha'shela. So then we have a question. It seems like this already happened before, like the same dynamic happened last time and it's happening again. Im yesh terchak lahasbir et haseder shemoshe medaber pam echad ve'Aaron yamlitzu v'yatinu. That if Rashi is taking the time to explain to us that Moshe is just going to say one thing, and Aaron will translate and explain. Tzricha hayita haTorah l'saper zot b'pam harishona. So the Torah should have explained this the first time around in last week's parsha. Shedibru el Paro, the parsha Shmos, that they spoke to Paro. When they spoke to Paro in last week in parsha Shmos, v'im zehu davar hamuvan me'elav shekishe dibru shneim amar Moshe ha'ikar b'kitzer v'Aaron hitinu madua meferet zot haTorah kan. And if this is obvious that when they speak to Paro, Moshe says the main point, the basic idea, and Aaron explains and fleshes it out. So why is it being told to us here? Afshar hayal l'tzayam b'kitzer shemoshe yitzraf elev al Aaron. And we could have just said very simply, Moshe will go together with Aaron. Kefisha amor Rashi b'Torah lifnecha, as Rashi actually explained previously in a different pasuk. Al vayidbar Hashem el Moshe v'al Aaron. If we look footnote number 16 in pasuk Yud Gimel, Perek Vav, it says Hashem spoke to Moshe and Aaron, and Rashi says Lefi shamar Moshe va'ani arel sfatayim Sariflo HaKadosh Baruch Hu as Aaron, because Moshe says that he cannot, that he is has a speech obstruction. So it could have just said, because Moshe is Arel Satan, he has a speech problem. Hashem gave him Aaron. It would have been very simple, as we were told in a previous pasuk, same way. A second question, Sheila Gdola Yoter, an even bigger question. Hare Moshe kavar ta'an lifnechem. This isn't the first time that Moshe has reached out to Hashem and said, I have trouble speaking. Kaved peh v'kaved lashon anochi. He already said, I have difficulty speaking. HaKadosh Baruch Hu ana lo, and Hashem already answered him. Al kach shehu yeh lecha peh. Aaron will be your spokesman. V'madua ekoto, and kan shuv Moshe oto ta'ina. So why does he have to go back and give Moshe the same answer once again? L'chora hen ani arel sfatayim. It seems like it's the same complaint over and over again. V'mitzad sheni, from another perspective, the same question. Im nusaf chidush kishalahu b'tayna hashniya shebiglalo ein ze be'etza she'aron yeh lecha peh. Ketzad hu na'aneh al yidei she'aron achicha yeh neviacha. So if it's the same complaint or the same issue being brought up again, how is the same answer going to help? If you want to say he brought it up once and got answer A, I have difficulty speaking, he got one solution. Then he brings it up again, I have difficulty speaking, and he gets a different solution, that would make sense. But if he's going to bring up the same difficulty 2 times in a row, what's it going to help to get the same answer both times? Aaron will be your spokesperson. So the first question over in this section is, why is it explained over here? It could have been explained previously when it came up the first time. And the second question is, why is the same issue coming up twice? And if the same issue is coming up twice, why is the same answer being given both times? So we're going to kind of go out, those questions are going to lead us to the premise that that's not exactly what's happening, that the issues maybe aren't exactly the same that are being brought up twice. The answer is not exactly the same, perhaps. And the fact that it's not brought in this section, that this conversation doesn't happen in Parshas Shmos is because it needs to happen here. But that's in the background. First, we're going to attempt at an answer, and then the Rebbe is going to obviously go a little bit deeper than that. So, Seif Gimel. Yesh mefarshim ha'onim al hashela hashniya. So there are people that answer the second question. Shebetchila midabar rak al hadibor el ha'am. That the first time when Moshe says he has a speech impediment is really just when he's speaking El Ha'am, to the nation. And here what's unique is that he's being sent to talk to Paro. And that's why Moshe comes back a second time and says, I am Arel Sfatayim. I have a difficulty speaking, a speech obstruction. HaKadosh Baruch Hu anash shegam b'shlichus el Paro v'aron achicha yeh neviacha. So Hashem's answer, according to this idea, which we're actually, spoiler alert, gonna reject or just go a little deeper then, but on the surface, Hashem's answer is, I am going to send Aaron, your brother, and he will be your spokesperson. Aval Chelek has berzeh, but we can't accept it. Why? Aleph, miyad le'achar divrei Hashem b'pam harishona al kach shemoshe yashliach Hashem muzkaret shtei hashlichos lecha v'asavta ziknei Yisrael v'gam v'ashlechas Paro, because the first time around Hashem actually told him to do 2 things. He said, speak to the elders of Israel, and he also said, and I will send you to Paro. Mizamuvan shechua Hashem hu yelecha peh lemar legabe shtei hashlichos. So therefore, it's clear that the answer of Hashem, that he will be for you a spokesperson, was actually said to both situations, speaking to the elders and speaking to Paro. So we're back to square one, that we feel like Moshe has already brought up this issue in the same circumstance. Another reason we can't accept it, bet v'ikar la'achar mispar psukim la'acharei shemisupar she'Hashem hiskim shehu yeh l'chapet. A few psukim later, if you want to look in last week's parsha, it's in Kaf Aleph and Kaf Bet of Perek Dalid. After it's already been agreed upon in Parsha Shmos in last week's parsha, that Aaron will be your spokesman. Nisaperet HaTorah, Sheshem Amar LaMoshe Beperush, that it says in the Torah that Hashem said to Moshe clearly, V'lechtecha l'shuv Mitzrayim, you will return to Mitzrayim, V'sita lifnei Paro, V'mart el Paro, and you will speak to, and you will go in front of Paro, and you will speak to Paro. V'sham lotan Moshe kelapei Hashem kaved peh v'kavdoma. And at this point, when Hashem tells Moshe to speak to Paro in Parshas Shmos, when he's on the way and he's on the donkey with Sipporah and his son, he doesn't say anything back. He says, "Okay." He doesn't say, "I have difficulty speaking." Tzarich efo lomar shehu hevin shelamarot shegam hu yamuchach ledaber el Paro v'amart. It seems to be saying that he understood that despite the fact that he's obligated to speak to Paro, as it says the amart, meaning he really has to speak directly, shelo kibedibor el bnei Yisrael, sharak Aaron dibor, not like when he spoke to the elders where really just Aaron speaks, hu yechol lakachat gam es Aaron lepeh. He can also take Aaron as a spokesperson. So Seif Dalid. That he understood this was obvious, that even when he has to speak to Paro, he can take Aaron. So so we haven't really answered the question. We've really actually just made it a little bit more deep, the question, why is it being said here and what's different in this situation? So now that we understand that we must be speaking about something that's distinct, now we're going to actually ask 4 questions on Rashi's commentary on this pasuk itself. If you look back at the pasuk, at the Rashi, atad titaber, you should speak pa'am echad, one time, kol shlichut v'shlichut, each message, kifi sheshamat b'pi, as you heard from my voice. And Aaron, your brother, will translate and explain to the ears of Paro. So the Rebbe is going to ask 4 questions on that Rashi. Now that the backdrop has already been set, that there's a lot of question as to why that even though we don't know yet why, there must be something very different happening here than what happened in Parshas Shmos when they were commanded to go, and Moshe also then said he had a speech impediment. So Seif Dalid, B'nosach lamor la'ayil yesh l'tzay mispar diyukim b'lashon Rashi. So in addition to everything that we've discussed thus far, there are 4 questions that we have on Rashi. Aleph, Muvan shemoshe diber b'kitzer, v'Aaron herchiv v'hisbir tadbarim, aval madua nachutz lamar shemoshe diber dafka pam echad v'lo yoter. Okay, it's understood that Moshe is going to speak briefly, just the basic idea, and Aaron is going to expand upon it and explain it. But why does it have to say that Moshe is dafka specifically one time and not more? What's significant about him speaking just once? That's question 1. Why one time? Question 2, bet, Madua medayek Rashi, ve'omer pam echad kol shlichut v'shlichut. Lichora mat'im yoter lomar kol tzivui v'tzivui, kilashon haTorah es kol asher etzavacha. Why does he use the word shlichut? And again, it's probably not the right thing to do to editorialize or to try to jump into why the Rebbe chose this Rashi, but I was sort of wondering if maybe the word shlichut being used over here caught the Rebbe's attention, and that's where, but this is just my own thought. So why does Rashi use the word shlichut? It doesn't seem to be the right word. It should have said sivui, command, instead of saying each of my messages, or my shlichut means my messengers, one by one, but rather it should have been kol tzivui, each of my commands, just like the Torah uses the phrase as kol asher etzavecha, that which I have commanded you. Question number 3, hamilim kifi sheshamat mepi nirot lichora miyuteret v'ki yamar Moshe leparo dvarim she'enam kifi sheshamat Hashem. Why the additional words, just as you heard from my mouth? That seems to be extra words. Why, and would we even assume for a second that Moshe would say anything that he didn't hear directly from Hashem? And the 4th question, Madua mechupel halashon yamlitzu v'yatinu. Why 2 terms for what Aaron's job is going to be? To translate and to explain. Now, I keep using the word translate, which is different than explain, but actually that's not how it's translated in the basic translation of Rashi. It's actually planned shall express it eloquently and explain it, so Paro will understand, which basically seem to be the same thing. So just to reiterate these 4 questions, why does it say that Moshe is going to speak one time? Why does it use the strange word shlichut when it should have used the word command? Why does it tell us that Moshe should say exactly as Hashem said? Would we even assume Moshe would do different? And why are there 2 terms for Aaron's job? So Seif Hey. Hasber lakach yuvan. So now we're going to understand exactly how to answer those 4 questions, and we can understand our bigger issue of what's the difference between what's happening here and what happened in Parshas Shmos, when Moshe was also commanded to go, and he went with Aaron, and he also said, I have a problem with my speech, and he was also then told that Aaron will be your spokesperson. Hasber lakach yuvan lachar shizbar b'ma shona ta'anas Moshe kan b'ta'anos hakademas. So we're going to understand all of Rashi's diukim, all of his little points, when we can understand what's different in the answer that Moshe gave here versus last time. The Parshas Shmos hu Omer, in Parshas Shmos, he said, Kaved peh v'kaved lashon anochi. He said, I'm going to just translate very literal. My mouth is heavy and my speech is difficult or heavy. Bekan ani arel sfatayim, but here he uses a different phrase. He uses ani arel sfatayim, which Rashi explains as atum, like my speech is stopped up. B'miyuchad lefi perish Rashi zehu shinui gam betefan ha'inyan v'lo rak b'lashon. And according to Rashi, those 2 phrases, kaved lashon, kaved peh v'kaved lashon versus arel sfatayim, they're not just 2 phrases to mean the same thing. They actually mean different things. What do they mean? Al kaved peh v'kaved lashon anochi. So like he said in Parshas Shmos, my speech is heavy, and my mouth is heavy. Masvir Rashi b'kvidus ani medaber. Rashi is saying, with great difficulty I speak, which means kalomar hu misuga l'daber. I'm fortunate to speak. Aval b'kvidus, but with difficulty. V'bekoshi, and with challenge. Ve'ilu al arel sfatayim. However, Rashi explains the phrase arel sfatayim quite differently. Masbir Rashi, atum, it's sfatayim, my lips are stopped up. Satav atumot. The zohi hafra b'dibor, that I can't speak. There's like an obstruction, there's a problem, and that's what's happening. So those are 2 different things. One is I can do it with very, very big challenge, and the other is I can't do it. The zehu hachidish b'taina hashniya, and this is what's unique about the second taina, the second complaint or issue that Moshe brings up. B'tchila chashav Moshe shehu rak kaved peh v'kaved lashon. In the beginning, Moshe thought of himself as just having difficulty speaking. Sheyacholta l'daber, that he could. Ela shezeh karoch b'koshi mesuyam, but it happened with great difficulty and challenge. V'lachen dai haya b'kachto imo es Aaron. Therefore, it was enough to take Aaron k'dei lahasbir v'lahatim laparo es divrei Moshe haksarim, in order for him to explain and expound upon and to flesh out to Paro at the brief words of Moshe. Avalata hegila miskanash ani arel satan. But now it's descended into a much different place, a much more difficult, a much more challenging situation of arel svatayim. Hadibur klal eineni efshar etzlo. This speech is completely impossible for me. I'm not able to do it. Ki'ilu haya atum, like stopped up, as Rashi says, obstructed. V'lachen ein efsharut lishloach oto leParo, and therefore don't send me to Paro. Lehefech im yavo el Paro vayishtok harei lo rak shelo titzmach mizeh to'eles ela hepech nezek. Because even more so, it's not just that I won't be helpful by standing in front of Paro silent. I'm actually going to cause damage. Paro alul havin shtika zok haskama. Paro is going to think silence is an agreement. Lakach shetichadu ha'avoda v'kedoma, that, and he'll like as if I agree with him, and he'll make the work even harder, etc. I just want to share a little anecdote. Sometimes if my kids are being a little like funny, they'll ask me something, and before I get a chance to respond, shtika kehoda. If you don't say anything, it's as if you agree. So there's this idea that being silent is sort of a form of showing a form of agreement. So Moshe is saying that if I'm going to stand silent in front of Paro, it's actually going to weaken the whole thing. It's going to look as if maybe I agree with Paro, or Al kach analo Hashem. Therefore, Hashem says to him, Ata tidaber, you will speak. Ein zet sivui bilvad. This isn't just a command. Alav l'daber, ela gam havtacha ata tidaber. But this is a promise that you will speak. Amnam hu arel sfatayim, aval hakadosh baruch hu yavshar lo ledaber. So even though you are arel sfatayim, you are obstructed, you are stopped up, Hashem is promising you will speak. I think that's really powerful, and I'm going to break a rule here and just give a personal anecdote. I remember one time when I was in the middle of labor, and I said to my midwife, I can't do this. And she said, you are doing it. So I'm not going to pretend that's the same situation, but this idea, Hashem is saying to him, it's a promise. It's not, you must go do this. You will speak. I am arel sfatayim. I'm totally stopped up. And Hashem says, you will speak. You will speak. So now we see that they are two totally different situations, very different situations from last week's parsha to this week's parsha. Over there, he's saying, I'm speaking with difficulty. And here he's saying, I can't, I'm atum sfatayim, I'm stopped up, I can't speak. Lachen medayek Rashi. Now we're going to answer the question number 2, which was, why does he use the word shlichut, a messenger, as opposed to the word command? Lachen medayek Rashi v'omer kol shlichut v'shlichut. This is why Rashi uses the word shlichut. Kidei lahadgish she'achoto shel Moshe ledaber lo nivat mekaychas atzmo, in order to point out that what Moshe is going to do is not going to come from his own kaychas, from his own strengths, from his own personal abilities, ela mikach shehu halach b'shlichus Hashem, but rather because he is going on the message, the messages, the job of Hashem. V'zos la'achar sherashi nifaresh lifneichen. Ani Hashem kedai ani l'shalech v'lakayem divrei shlichos. And this is what, and this is after what Rashi's already told us. I am Hashem, and I will send you, and you will do the job that you were sent on. Dai b'kach she'ani hu ha'mishaleach. It's enough that I am the mishaleach. I'm the one who sent you. And that is enough for you to be able to fulfill the mission. And therefore, you will speak, and this speaking is because of the mission that you've been sent on. Because I am sending you on this mission, you have the strength to fulfill this mission. So it's a promise. It's not just a demand or a command. So Seif Vav, we're going to start by answering the question number 1. We asked 4 questions on Rashi. So the first question was, why does it say Moshe is going to speak once? What's specific about him speaking one time as opposed to just speak a little bit? Why does Rashi say one time you will fulfill the mission, just as you heard from my mouth? Hakavana behalichas Moshe ledaber el Paro lo heita l'shichneu behesbarim ubetamim ela la'avir lo eshlichus Hashem. So the intention of Moshe going over to Paro was not just to explain to him ideas, but rather to do the mission of Hashem. Moshe haya shliach Hashem. Moshe was the messenger of Hashem, el Paro, to Paro, the makom hamishleach, and he's there, he's standing in, he's filling in for Hashem himself, the mishaleach, the one who sent. The lachen haya Moshe tzarich la'avir b'diuk es lashon hamishaleach, and therefore he has to say exactly the words of the mishaleach of God, rak pam echat, and only one time. Kefi sheshmat mepi b'diuk be'oto signon, exactly as he heard it, in the exact same style and in the exact same way. So that actually answers question 1 and 3. 1 was, why does he say it once? And 3 was, isn't it obvious that he would be saying exactly what Hashem said? But the point is that it's not that it's just that it's obvious, but this is the way it has to be, because Moshe is going in as a shliach of Hashem. Al kach me'oreres hashayla, and through this we have another question. HaKadosh Baruch Hu diber el Moshe b'lashon hakodesh. Okay, so what language did Hashem speak to Moshe in? In Hebrew, in lashon hakodesh. V'fichach gam Moshe diber el paro b'lashon zeh. And since now we know Moshe has to say word for word verbatim exactly as he heard it, he's going to have to say it in Hebrew. Kefi sheshmat mepi, as you heard from my mouth. V'lo muvan b'parshas vayechi. Kavar tzien Rashi sheparo lo hikir es lashon hakodesh. And Rashi already told us in Parshas Vayechi that Paro doesn't know this language. V'ketzad hayayechol efo lavin es divrei Moshe. So how is he going to understand it? Okay, this leads us into the answer to question number 4, which was, why do we have 2 terms for what Aaron's job is going to be? V'lachen mamshech Rashi. V'Aaron achicha yamlitzu v'yatinu. Therefore, Rashi uses 2 words. Yamlitzu, similar to the word melitz, means translate. But yatinu means explain, because he has 2 jobs. He has to translate from Hebrew into into Egyptian, and he has to expound and explain. Habituvi yamlitzu kolo gam mashmaut shel targum misafa echad lacheret. So the word yamlitzu means the translation from one language to another. Kfi shemiparesh Rashi, as Rashi explained lifnechen beparshas Miketz. As Rashi explained before in a previous parsha, al hapasa ki hamelitz benotayim, that the translator was between them. This is referring to when Yosef is meeting with his brothers. Kishayu medarim imo hayu haya hamelitz beinehem, as it says when they were hayadu lashon ivri v'lashon mitzri v'haya hamelitz divrehim. As it says between them there was a translator who knew both lashon, the Hebrew language and the Egyptian language, and there was a translator between them. Kilomar la'aron hayat tafkid kaful. Therefore, Aaron had 2 jobs. Aleph yamlitzu, targum gam min hasafa shaba diber Moshe. He has to translate from the language that Moshe is speaking in. And bet by yitamu hasver tochen hadvarim kav shekablu ba'aznei paro. He also has to clarify and explain the meaning and the connotation of the words in order that it should be acceptable, or to be understood, it should penetrate into the ears of Paro. So we answered the 4 questions on Rashi, and we shed light on the fact that after a long buildup, that the situation in Shmot, in Parsha Shmos, was different to the situation in this week's Parsha. Now we're up to Seif Zayin. L'chora adayin lo barer. So the Rebbe still has something to question on. Can you imagine? Im Paro lo havin es divrei Moshe. If Paro doesn't understand the words of Moshe, mahi ha to'eles b'dibor. What's the point of him speaking anyway? Ba'ad kedei kach sheyesh sorach l'shem kach b'matan efsherut miyuchad l'Moshe. And what's special about what? And through this, what's special about what Moshe is doing? Hahezber lakachu. Dvarim elu hem behemshach leperish Rashi al pasuk hakodem. To understand this, we can look at the words in the Rashi on the pasuk before, where it says, "Netaticha Elokim laparo." I will make you a master over Paro. Shofet v'rodeh l'radoso v'makot v'yasurun. You will be like an enforcer. You will hit him, you will punish him, you will be completely in charge of him. You will completely intimidate him. Kilomar matar sibro shel Moshe el Paro lo hayeta l'shichno b'dvarim hagyonim. Meaning what Moshe's accomplishment here is not just that he's going to subjugate Paro, he's going to intimidate him through logical statements, etc. Kedome. This is actually the job of Aaron, that he's the one who, through his words, he's going to take control of the situation. He's going to be in charge of Paro. He's going to be the master of Paro. But rather, what's the role of Moshe? But rather to be an enforcer and to be intimidating in his presence and who he is. not in what he's saying, but in his entire presence of standing there. V'kach b'nyano Moshe Rabbeinu hiyatzorach lomar laparo v'tikifut shalachas ami. So Moshe has to say to Paro in complete forcefulness, send out my nation. Kach shemitzaveh hadibor b'mehavat panav shel Moshe v'oto sha'ah. And he's going to see the tsura, the form, and the facial expression of Moshe at that time. Yavin Paro she'elu milim kashot, and Paro's going to understand what's going on. B'makot v'yasurin, and that they mean business, that this is tough and this is very serious. If you've ever heard someone speak in a language that you don't understand, you might be able to sometimes pick up on their emotions and what's going on and how intense what they're saying is, even if you don't understand the words they're saying, just through their body and through their language. So imagine in the greatness of Moshe Rabbeinu standing in front of you, even if you don't understand the words he's saying, but the way he's saying it is just take a second to imagine what that could possibly be like. It's a pretty powerful thing to think about. Moshe Rabbeinu standing in front of you with all his might and all his force. It doesn't even matter. Even if he was speaking English, I don't know if I could understand it. So struck by Moshe Rabbeinu standing in front of you. So now we've kind of gone through most of the logical steps of the Sikha, but we have the Yenei Shel Torah, of course. So we have Seif Ches, Yenei Shel Torah, the Perish Rashi Zeh, on the wine of Torah, the deepest parts of Torah on this Rashi. Al ha'inyan shel ra'eh nataticha Elokim leParo. It says, behold, I have placed you a master over Paro. Muzbar b'sifrei Chassidus. Chassidus explains, kasher klipos hatuma tkipos ein afilu l'tzadik koach l'hachnin. So when the impurity of klipa takes over a person, even a tzaddik doesn't necessarily have the power to surrender, to subjugate, to control the situation. As Maimar Chazal says, Imra'it Rasha Shasha Mesacheklo. If you see an evil person but the hour is good to him, Al Tiskarabo, do not tease him. Meaning, don't engage. You see a Rasha and he's like, he's just doing, everything seems to be going his way, and he's just doing like the terrible things, but it's working for him, and the Hashem is lo, like it's going right for him. Don't engage. Al tisgarabo. Davar zer natun rak le yachoto yisparach shehu kol yachol. This is really only for Hashem. Only Hashem can penetrate such a difficult situation. Shafil the Rasha shehu kol geya, because the Rasha is totally arrogant. Yitachen shevahashvilus v'hachneu v'hadach rashim tachtam. Even a tzaddik can't really overcome him, and the klipa, only Hashem can destroy impurity in a klipa that's strong. So in general, that's a general statement from Chazal, that when you see somebody who's so wound up in such horrible activity, there isn't anything human can do. It has to come straight from Hashem. Zohi mashmud hapasuk the re'el milishon chidush v'pila naticha elokim l'paro. This is the meaning of the pasuk that Hashem is saying to Moshe. I will, Paro obviously being a representative of a Rasha who's completely and totally bound up in evil, and I would imagine extremely arrogant. But this is why Hashem says to him, I will make you a master over Paro, even though normally this isn't the way of nature. Amnam Paro haya adain b'malo kocho. Paro was so powerful. Ad kadei kach shelo haya eved yachol libroach mitzrayim. As we know, the statement is that not even a single slave was ever able to leave Mitzrayim. Ach b'kol zot natan Hashem leMoshe. However, despite all of this, Hashem gave Moshe the power, mamshala zarua ke'el mamish al Paro, that you will be like a lord, a master over Paro. Ad kadei l'radot bo b'masochos v'yisurim, that you can speak to him forcefully, and as if you're going to be hitting him. You can intimidate him. This man who was probably perceived himself a god was the most powerful person politically, at least in the world at the time. So this power was not an ordinary person. It's not like some other leader of the Jewish people could have stood up to Paro. This was a power that was given to him specifically to Moshe. Kihu haya nasi hador, because he was the leader of the generation. Anochi omech bein Hashem ubeinechem lahagid lachem es devar Hashem. I am standing between you and Hashem in order to tell you the words of Hashem. Memutze shebe'emseuto magia devar Hashem mamish. As we've said, that from the mouth of Moshe, the words of Hashem literally poured out. It was as if there was no filter. Lefichach hisgala be'emseuto kocho shel Hashem l'radoto b'makos v'yisur. And therefore Hashem gave him this power to be intimidating, to be an enforcer, to be one that could hit and that could create difficulty for Paro himself. And then the brackets. B'kach muvan madua savor Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai shemutar lehisgorem b'rashaim. Now we can understand why Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, the Rashbi, he said that it's okay to interact with evil people. Gam kasher Hashem misachek lahem, even in their time when things are going well for them. Ki Rashbi haya nitzu shel Moshe Rabbeinu, because the Rashbi, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, was a spark, was the Moshe of his generation, was the leader of his generation. As we know that he had the ability to subjugate, to take over, to overpower evil people, even when they were at their full strength, at their full capacity. So this is the inner, the deeper meaning of these ideas. Of why did Moshe himself have to speak to Paro? Aleph, it wasn't enough, the words of Aaron. We needed the Moshe of the generation. We needed the leader of the generation to do it, who was given this power, this godly power to be forceful over Paro. And even though he was speaking a language that Paro is not going to understand, he had the responsibility to break him, to overpower him when he's at his full strength, not when he's in a vulnerable point. Therefore, Aleph Davarza Afshar Rak Bekochel Shel Moshe. It could only be Moshe, couldn't be anybody else. And Bet Ein Zeh Inyan Shel Biror Ki Im Shvira. This is not about elevating. This is about breaking. Liradato, overpowering. The Ein Chashivus Lakach Shaparo Yavin Asad Dvarim. And therefore, it didn't matter if Paro is going to understand his words or not. He needed to break him. Siv Tes Arel Svatayim. Sorry. Lefi kol ha'amor la'ayil. So everything that we've discussed so far, Muvan Madua Omer Rashi Shemoshe Tzarich lahavir es divrei Hakadosh Baruch Hu rak kefi sheshamat mipi. That Moshe had to repeat the words exactly as he heard them from Hashem. Hakoch lishbor es klipos hatuma, in order to break up the impurity. Kasher hen b'malo Otzman nitan l'Moshe v'yosh shaliach Hashem shebe'umsut zizkala kocho shel Hashem, because Moshe was the shliach, the messenger of Hashem, and through this he's revealing the great. He's able to act with the greatness of Hashem. Zerua ke'el lachen haya dibro be'ofen shel ata tedaber kefi sheshmat mepi. Therefore, you'll speak exactly as you heard from my mouth. V'doma le'shchina medaber mitoch roni shel Moshe. As we've heard this concept before, that the Shechina, the aspect of Hashem, will speak from the throat of Moshe, meaning that the words that come out of Moshe, it's as if there's no filter. It's like Hashem speaking directly. So now we have another question. V'kach nitan lasbir madua matchil ha'inyan shel ata tadaber b'pam achat kol shlichut b'shlichut kefi sheshmat mepi rak lacher shetan Moshe ani arel satayim. So why was he told to do this now, after he says ani arel tzvatayim? I am stopped up, atu, my lips are, my speech is obstructed. Why did Hashem wait to that point to give Moshe this instruction that you are going to be my shliach, that your words are going to break Paro, that you're gonna have this sort of godly strength to what you're saying? Musbar b'Torah's Chassidus, Shayota Moshe kaved peh v'kaved lashon. It says in Chassidus that previously, when Moshe was in the stage of it was difficult to speak. Kaved peh v'kaved lashon. Niv'a mihitbatlus k'lepei elokus sheb'nei otzemet hitbatluto hu lo haya yachol lahashpia b'not doma le v'hiuto tarud b'blia eno polet. That Moshe was nullified to godliness in a way that he wasn't able to have an influence in that way. Because when something is involved in expelling, it doesn't absorb. That's the rule that's brought over here. That comes from halacha, that when something, if you think of like a sponge, while you're squeezing out the sponge, it's not also absorbing water. It's one or the other. Mizamuvan sheito Moshe arel satayim mochiach et godel hitpatlut gedola ach min hadarga shel hayoto kaved peh v'kaved lashon. But when he gets to the next level, so when he was like, it's difficult, so he's using his energy to speak. It's a challenge, it's difficult. But now when he's saying I'm stopped up, it's impossible. That's an even deeper level of being totally and completely given over to Hashem, nullified or batal, as we say. It's even more batal than the stage of it's difficult for me to do it, but I'll overcome the challenge and I'll do it. When he was on that stage of difficulty, he still had the ability, he still had the ability to speak, hashpa, and to have influence. It wasn't completely and totally given over to Hashem. But when he says I'm a rel svatayim, I'm stopped up, mar'eh al hitbatlut muchletet. This is completely nullified. It's completely and totally given over to Hashem. She'einhu muskal klal davar. There's nothing about it that's him. It's like you completely can't do something and all of a sudden you can do it. It wasn't me. It was something came over me, so to speak. Lechen hayato dafkar hitbatlut bedarga arel svatayim. He had to be on that level of arel svatayim, completely, totally given over. He's orus milamata, an arousal from below. Hamatima le're'en aticha elokim leparo. So that in order to be able to be the master over Paro, it had to come from a place where he was really, really given over to Hashem. There was no even hint that it was him, that it was coming from himself. And he's at this level of nullification that there's no feeling that it's him whatsoever. Moshe Devar Hashem Mamish Kedoresh Hachnaat Paro, and he had to be on that level that the Hashem was speaking through him. That there's no trace of his ego, his sense of self at all, in order to subjugate Paro. Seif Yud. So why didn't Moshe speak to the Jews this way? Why is this incredible state that we just described, or he's totally given over to Hashem, where it's like, why is this reserved for Paro? Why not the Jewish people? So now we have a question. Why does Paro get this privilege that he gets to hear from Moshe? But the Jewish people, when he speaks to the Ziknei Yisrael, that comes through Aaron. As it says. Amnam b'nei Yisrael lo hizdaku lakach, be'od asher hapnat Paro haytam ufachet lehiyasot be'emsa'ut kochel shamosha. So b'nei Yisrael did not need this. In order for him to subjugate Paro in this way, he needed that motion, that strength. And the parentheses, v'ken gam b'pashtus ha'inyan, Yisrael hem ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim. Simply said, Yisrael are believers and sons of believers. But dialahem b'divrei Aaron, and the words of Aaron were enough. Hamavir lahem kishlocho shel Moshe es hadrim sheshama Moshe mahashem, because he was giving them the words of Moshe as Moshe heard from Hashem. B'miyad ba'amin ha'am, and right away they believed. Ba'afilu ein Paro eina misapek b'kach u'Moshe ba'atzon mufrach l'davar. But Paro was not on as high a level as the Jewish people in that sense, and he needed it to come from Moshe. Ach b'kolzot lo kol kach baror, but still, that's the Rebbe saying it's not totally clear. Madua yachzar mibnei Yisrael inyan hanayla hazeh shel dibur Moshe. Why doesn't seemingly Bnei Yisrael have this great, amazing experience of hearing straight from Moshe? Hezber lakach hu kasher ma'avir Aaron et divrei Moshe l'Yisrael. When Aaron would give the words to the Jews, the words of Moshe to the Jews, naseh hadavar rak b'derech ma'aver. It was like a transition, like a garden hose, like it just goes right through, the water goes right through the hose. Bnei Yisrael mekablim et dvarav shel Moshe lelo shum shinui. They were getting Moshe's words, it was through Aaron, but there was no change whatsoever. The Yerida biglal hamemutza, and there was no Yerida, there was no downgrade because of the translator or the one speaking. Kishem shemoshe kibel Torah misinai, the Masara Yeshua, the Yeshua Zakanim. As we know from Pirkei Avos, Moshe got the Torah from Hashem, and he transmitted it to Yeshua, and Yeshua to the elders. Shalamarocha Torah Avram mispar mimutziim. So as we know that the Torah went from level to level or from person to person, bekozot he oto Torah Messinai, but it's always still considered Torah Messinai, no matter how it's transmitted, or how many times, as I should say, it's been transmitted. Kemaimer Chazal, as the rabbis say, Kol ma shetalmid v'tik atid l'chadesh nitan l'Moshe Messinai. Even into the future, what every teacher and student will come up with, a novel idea, a new concept that we haven't heard before, this was given to Moshe at Sinai. The ilu etzel paro elo haya divru shel Moshe magia elav rak b'emsut Aaron haya hechrach sheyitzaveh bo shinuim beofen shel hitlav shus v'kocho shel Moshe hechri lechachni paro haya chaser bo. However, when it came to Paro, yes, Moshe speaks to him directly, but it comes only when he's with Aaron. It has to be drawn down, and there are changes, and he has to translate it. The power of Moshe was needed to subjugate, to break Paro, but it's a haya chaser bo. That was not in Aaron's words, but we needed Aaron to explain and to translate and to change the words when he's speaking to Paro. But when he's speaking to the Jewish people, that's not what's happening. Therefore, the psukim are written differently. When it's talking about the Jewish people and Aaron speaking with Moshe to the Jews, it says he will be for you a mouth. Lagabe Paro, but when it's talking about Aaron accompanying Moshe to Paro, it says Aaron will be your spokesman. So it's a difference between my spokesman and my mouth, right? Lagabe Yisrael haya Aaron piv shel Moshe. He was his mouth. That was it. Lech lepeh. Diviru shel Aaron haya be'oto darga shel Moshe. And the words of Aaron were on the same level of Moshe. Kema avar bilvad. They just translate like water going through a hose. It just went from one to the next. The elu lagabe Paro, but not so with Paro. Haya Aaron rak nivi echa. Aaron's your spokesman. As we already said, he's going to change the language. Keperish Rashi mitorgaman, as Rashi explains, he's going to translate. The kasher ovrim hadvarim be'emsaut mitorgamam hem mishtanim. And when something goes through a translation process, and anyone uses Google Translate here for different things, it changes the word. Lefi erech hamikablim, and it has to do with the person that's hearing it, the person that's receiving it. Kemispar mispar mikomos, as it explains at numerous places elsewhere. Seif Yud Aleph. So what's the lesson? Because now that we got this whole deep understanding of the difference in this parsha and last week's parsha, the two aspects of Moshe, difficulty speaking, unable to speak, the role of Aaron, we can't walk away unless we have a hora. Hora hanela medet mikach lavodas Hashem. What is the lesson in our avodas Hashem? Hapratit shel kol echad ve'echad, my personal for each and every single one of us. Latim nimtzaim hanefesh elokis begalus. Sometimes a godly soul finds itself in gullus. It finds itself in exile. The nefesh bahamis, within the animal soul, within the body. Ad ofin shabo hasha misacheket la, until the point where, as we said about the Russia, like it's going well for the nefesh bahamis. It's going well for the animal soul. Klipa hutumahi b'matzav shel gasus shemagbiya atzma shel or kedushas nefesh elokis. And the powers of impurity, the impurity is in a stage of strength, as it says. It just totally covers up the godly soul, covers up the light of the godly soul. And the animal is doing great, has a good job, it eats well, it sleeps well, it exercises, takes care of itself. Hapitron lekachu naticha elokim laparo liritatot b'makos v'yasurin. So what's the solution to this? You were given the power to be the God of Paro, to be the Lord of Paro, the master of Paro, with strength and with enforcers and with fear of punishment. Yargiz Adam Yetzer Tov al Yetzer Hara. That it has to be the way that the person will force upon himself the Yetzer Tov, will force it upon the Yetzer Hara. The good will force itself upon the evil. Yarim Alea B'kol Ra'ash V'rogesh L'hashpil L'Omarlo Atara. And with all its strength and all its might, it will say, you are bad, you're evil. Bekach tishbar gasos aklipas. And this is what's going to break the klipa. This is what's going to break the impurity shahal nefesh bahamas of the animal soul. Kemusbar betanya beharchava, as explained in Tanya extensively, that through being tough, through that you can be the Lord over the evil. You can be the master over the evil. You might have to be tough. You might have to break it, but you can do this. V'yesh lomar shakoach lachen niten be'emseut Moshe Rabbeinu. And how can you do this? Where do you get the strength, the power, the ability to do this? To subjugate the animal, to being the one in control. This was given to you from Moshe Rabbeinu. Shashem amar lo ra'eh nataticha elokim laparo shofet v'radel l'radto b'makot yisurin. You will be the master over Paro. You will intimidate. You will force him. You will be his master. L'chen kiyam koach zeh etzel kol Yehudi. Sharei kol nefesh v'nefesh mebit Yisrael yeshba mebechinas Moshe Rabbeinu alav hashalom. And this power is given to every single Jew. As it says, every single soul from the house of Israel comes from the level, has within him, the level of Moshe Rabbeinu alav hashalom. We all have a spark of Moshe within us. How much more so? Chakachu hadavar etzel kol Yisrael kechlal etzel hanasi haklal. And how much more so does this strength and this ability exist amongst the leader? Shanasi haklal, the hakol. The nasi is like a general soul for the entire generation. Kishem shel Moshe Rabbeinu b'tkupaso haya hakoach lo radot b'paro. So as we know that Moshe had the strength to overcome Paro, b'makot v'yisurin, with threatening and intimidation. Afilu kasher Hashem misacheklo, even when he was at his greatest point of power. Kahu b'kol dor v'dor. Therefore, in every single generation, shelenasi hador, that the leader of the generation, shehu it pashtut de Moshe v'kol dra v'dra, that the leader of the generation is referred to as the Moshe of the generation, has a spark of Moshe. He's the head of the generation, every single generation forward. Yesh hakoach lehizgaber al kol alamot v'hasterim ha'malim es hakadusha gam kasher hem chazakim. So that leader has the power to overcome and to override all of the difficulties and all of the troubles and bring out the holiness that is hidden. And we can do this even when it's the greatest, when these difficulties are at their greatest strength. They can be overcome through the leader of the generation, who is the Moshe of the generation. And to wrap up the final Seif Yud Bet, Zohi gam hatshuva lataina hanishmaot kevan shenimtzaim bechoshech kaful v'hamekubal shel dra deikva demashicha. This is the answer to what you might hear on the street, the talk on the street. Here we are in the doubled over darkness. We are in the generation that's going to bring Mashiach. The last generation before Mashiach, a darkness that's doubled over. It's a very hard time. Al kol kach harbe ha'alamot v'hastarim kedoma, and the troubles and the difficulties are as strong as ever. Ketzad efshar levatzeh es tvia rabbeinu nisienu. How are we going to carry out the demands of the Rebbeim? Lahafitz es limud haTorah chasidus To carry out, to bring, to spread Hasidus and the ways of Hasidus in every single place. And especially places that are totally dirty and disregarded. I don't mean dirty physically, but totally just totally impure and unholy. How in the world are we supposed to do that? And people speak this way. And how are you going to do that? And how are you going to go out there? And how are you going to have an impact? And how are you going to help people? And to the point where they actually prevent and delay it from happening. What's the answer? We have to know that a spark of Moshe exists within each and every generation. And even in our generation, the last generation before Mashiach, the Adarabba, even more so. The neshamas, the souls of our generation, the one right before Mashiach, they are on the level of a Gilgul, a soul being recycled. Shel neshamas dor hamidbar, of the neshamas of the door of the generation of the desert. Ki yadua, harei vadai ka'imim otam ha'inyanim shehu bedor hamidbar gam b'tikikuteinu, as is known, that many of the same things that happened in that generation we experience in our own ways in this generation. Ba'al yedei zeh shemitkashrim el nasi hador. So therefore, through this, if we connect ourselves to the Nasi Hador, the leader of the generation, as the Rebbe points out, the Frierdiker Rebbe, Kavod Kedudashas Mori V'chami Admor, he's referring to his father-in-law, the previous Rebbe. Ein lehitragesh v'lehibahel minha elamot v'hastarim. Don't be nervous, don't be afraid, don't be intimidated from all of the difficulties, from all the challenges. Ki kayim hakoach shel Moshe, because he has the power of Moshe Rabbeinu, he's gaber aleihim, to overpower them, to conquer them. L'ridatot b'makot v'yasurim, through forcefulness. V'adai tzarich linhog b'darchei noam b'darchei shalom. Okay, but now we're gonna get to what we were, I don't know if anyone was thinking this, but it has to be in a way of darchei noam, in a way of peaceful, in a way of pleasantness, the darchei shalom, keratzon kach moch admor. So it's not just, we're not going out to fight. We have the power to be on top and to be in charge, and we're forceful in that sense. But how is this achieved? Through darchei noam and darchei shalom, ways of peace, ways of kindness, like the will of Chach Moch Admor, like the will of the Frierdiker Rebbe, Kefi shehu bikesh ma'aviv, as he asked his father, the Rebbe Rashab, Admor Marashab, Nishmas Edem, Shenisiyato tieh b'chesed u'berachemim. He asked his father that his nesiyas, that his time as a leader should be in a way of chesed and rachamim, of kindness. Aval tzarich ladat, but one must know, sheka'asher kashurim el nasi hador, when you are connected to the nasi hador, b'amsu limud Torah, and how does somebody connect to the nasi hador? By learning his Torah, hakbada al tikkanav, punctiliousness, on his tikkunim, on what he asks us to do, on his requests, being careful to fill his requests properly. V'halicha be'orchotav netzach salava ed, as ein l'hibahel mishum ha'alamot hastarim. There's nothing to be afraid of. There's nothing to be intimidated of. There's nothing to be set back by when one is connected. And one learns, not just connected, like, oh, I feel connected, I'm gonna sing a song, but I learn the Torah of the Nasi and I carry out his requests carefully and with details. And just like Moshe was able to subdue the klipa, the impurity, the negativity of Paro, Vatzias Kol Yisrael, and he took out all the Jews in Megalas Mitzrayim from the exile of Egypt, Biyad Rama, with a strong hand, and just sneak out in the middle of the night. Kach yed gam achshav, so too right now, Shebli his chavshus bekoshi hagalas, without worrying about all the difficulty of the exile. Yotzi Moshe Shebador Otanu Kulanu Min Hagalas El Hagula. Moshe is going to take us out of the Galus right into the Geula Ha'amiti, the Hashlema, Biyad Rama, Ubekarov Mamish. It's going to take us out of this exile completely and with strength and immediately and in our days. Thank you, guys. Thanks for
Thank
your
you.
patience.
Thank you
Sorry
very
about
much.
posting the wrong sikha. I hope it wasn't too,
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tzippa.
Very
Thank
clear.
Thank you. Very, very,
Excellent.
very,
you,
very good
Tzippa.
job and incredible.
Thank you, Tzippa.
thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it. And again, sorry about posting the wrong sikha originally.
Thank you very, very much.
No worries. Beautiful, beautiful. Thank